Wisconsin Eye's coverage of Campaign 2014 is being brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice supporting Wisconsin hospitals in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 election continues. We're interviewing Jefferson County District Attorney Susan Happ. She's a Democrat running for Attorney General. And just one note, Wisconsin Eye thanks the Wisconsin Hospital Association for helping make these interviews possible. DA Happ, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.
You gave an intriguing speech at the Democratic State Convention. You open it this way: you're a Harley-riding Democrat from a Republican county. Give me a short reason why that's your opening line to the Democratic State Convention, because it got their attention.
Right. Well, it comes down to the fact that I can win and that I'm different. Primaries, as you know, are a little bit about what makes the candidates different, and that does separate me. First and foremost, I'm a woman. I do ride a Harley, and being a Democrat from a Republican county should tell people that I can earn votes not just from my Democratic base, but independent and swing voters as well.
Okay. How big of a Harley? What model?
I have what I call a fat tail. It's a fat boy frame, but that everything on it is a soft tail.
That weighs a lot, doesn't it?
About 600 pounds.
Okay. Why did you decide to run for the statewide office? I mean, you're a veteran DA. You were elected in 2008 and re-elected unanimously?
Correct.
Okay.
Without an opponent in 12.
Without an opponent in 12.
Correct.
And this is the year you run for Attorney General because, okay, finish that.
Right, so I decided that I could do more. I've done a lot of great work in Jefferson County. I believe that our next Attorney General has to be a person who will truly represent all of our citizens, not just the special interests, not the people who have the money and the power and the connections. And as I said, coming from Jefferson County, Republican County, as a Democrat, I have to represent all of our citizens, and I have to be able to attend to the needs and the concerns of all of my constituents without regard to what their political persuasion is. And I really ran because I care about Wisconsin and our future, and we deserve better. When
you were elected in 2008, you said you were the first Republican you were the first Democrat, and I apologize, in 70 years.
Correct.
Okay, so that means you can go for the swing voters.
Exactly.
I enjoyed your speech, and I'm going to quote from it. When will the attacks stop? As soon as you elect me, they stop. What do you mean attacks?
Well, before that, I talked about the fact that we've seen our government taking away our rights. Taking away, pulling away and chipping away at our values. So it was everything from, our right to vote. Every person who wants to vote, who can legally vote, should be able to vote. And so that, of course, was a reference to the voter ID law that we have. We should allow people to marry who they love. So that was a reference to our now unconstitutional ban against gay marriage. And so we've just seen a chipping away of the values and the rights that we hold near and dear as Wisconsin citizens. And we've seen it, being perpetuated by virtue of partisan politics. And as I said, being that Dem from a Republican county, if I interject partisan politics in my decision making, I'm out of a job. And yet I was reelected in 12 without an opponent. So we need and we deserve an advocate who's going to put the people ahead of those partisan politics.
Okay. And you did talk about the right to vote, and you talk about world-class public schools. Do you also feel our K-12 schools have been under attack?
Well, yeah, because, we look at education. Both of my parents were public school teachers. They taught nearly for 3 decades each. And my father's been deceased for 16 years now, but he would just be appalled at the attacks that we've seen on our teachers and our public workers and education in general. I mean, we all know as workers, as taxpayers, that we've got to do more with less. We understand that. So sacrifices need to be made. But our children are our future. And that's one place where I think we have to take a hard look at investing in our future and our kids and not attacking the teachers who are going to be the role models. I mean, I knocked on 20,000 plus doors in 2008, and I can still remember remember a number of those people telling me how honored and how respected my parents were and how fantastic a job that they did, teaching those people some 30 years prior. We got to get back to restoring respect for our teachers.
This is a father who you told the convention told you, don't let anybody tell you can't do anything because you're a girl.
That's right.
Well, do women professionals like you, especially in the legal profession, do they have to work 150% to be treated and paid the same as men?
Well, we've seen that being under attack as well. Equal pay for equal work. I mean, we're regressing. We're going backwards. The current administration has taken us decades backwards. Everything from women's ability to make their own health care decisions, the voting, the attacks that we're seeing on equal pay for equal work. And so, I mean, there's no question that women in the labor force earn 75 cents on a dollar for what men make. And so, yes, women are under attack. As district attorney, my salary is the same as my male colleagues, but we're still not at that 50% threshold that we should see. We're underrepresented in Congress. We're underrepresented. Women are underrepresented in many forms of our elected officials, but also in the professional realm.
Which is why Emily's List has endorsed you.
They have, and I'm also endorsed by AFSCME.
Yeah, also endorsed by AFSCME. You and I think the other two candidates talked about you were a founding member of the Heroin Task Force. Mm-hmm. Well, the current Attorney General talks about heroin. Sure. It's a scourge, it's an epidemic, but let's take it from the rhetoric. What are the next steps to fight heroin abuse in Wisconsin? DA Happ?
Sure. We have to have a collaborative approach that involves all of the critical people. And so as part of that task force, what we did in Jefferson recently had a couple, 300 people who attended a summit. And we've seen some summits, but getting it on the local level. And some of our presenters were, a physician from a pain management clinic. Mm-hmm. We had a mother who had lost her young daughter, to a heroin overdose. Department of Corrections, our school liaisons, law enforcement, human services, district attorneys, and bringing it to the people. If we wait for people to come and get the information, it's too easy for our citizens to say, it's not my problem. So I think education is important. I think, basically, grassroots, boots on the ground, involvement is important because these local communities, smaller communities, don't have the same resources. And I think the Department of Justice can be an excellent tool to help with that education portion, both in terms of educating our law enforcement officers, but also being more directly involved in educating the public. If they're not educated, if they don't know if mom and dad don't know that they've got to go into grandma's medicine cabinet and get rid of the Vicodin and the Percocet, because that's where we know that a lot of these opiate addictions start, then how are we going to stop it? So education is step number one. The other part that I've done that's a counterbalance to that, though, is I have aggressively prosecuted heroin dealers because they put the lives of others at risk. And so addicts in the criminal justice system are treated differently from people who are dealing the poison on the streets and risking other people's lives. And people who deal heroin, by and large, are prison sentences. People who are addicts, we look more towards rehabilitation and community treatment.
Reading my notes from the convention again, JB has failed to prosecute as much as you would internet predators of children.
It wasn't
would your first budget include a lot more resources for tracking down and catching internet predators of children?
We definitely have to put more staff and funding into our children. It wasn't that they failed to prosecute, it's that they failed to process the tips timely. Part of that is due to the fact that these types of crimes and these tips have skyrocketed. As technology has become more advanced, so have the offenders. So these tips that came in that we've been talking about languished. They weren't processed quickly, and you cannot afford to let the children fall through the cracks. So these tips have to be processed. Now, if that's a matter of staff allocation, that you need more agents, or if it's just a matter of oversight, making sure that guidelines are appropriately implemented to make sure that when a tip comes in, that there's steps that are taken once that tip comes in and that they're processed quickly. We do that in our office, and certainly there are going to be missteps in every administration, but then figuring out once those missteps occur, how do you rectify it? How do you have an appropriate response so that it doesn't happen again?
DAs like you need a timely response from the crime lab on evidence. How's our crime lab doing?
They're understaffed. The crime lab, when it comes to these drugged driving cases, again, as you see offenses they shift, right, by what our citizens are going through. So we've seen an increase in these drug driving cases, especially with the increase in people who are using opiates. And so, you'll see blood test results on an OWI, even if it's a higher level OWI, taking 6 to 9 months to get results. Well, sometimes that can result in the dismissal of a case, or it just results in a case having to be held open for that long period of a time before you can actually prosecute it to its conclusion. So we've got to look at increasing the funding for our crime lab.
You mentioned OWI. Should first offense be a crime?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I say that, I know I'm the only candidate who has come right out and said that, and I can say that for a number of reasons. First of all, criminalizing it doesn't, or not criminalizing it, doesn't address how serious these offenses are. We know they're serious. People who get behind the wheel intoxicated pose a direct danger to innocent people on the highways. The question is, will criminalizing it reduce or deter people from getting behind the wheel? There are other states, all the other states have quote-unquote criminalized it, but sometimes it's putting form over substance. Minnesota, for example, you're convicted, you undergo a very intensive treatment program for about 4 weeks, but then it comes off of your record after a year if you don't reoffend. Most people, when we say criminalize, we're thinking jail, we're thinking a criminal record, and that doesn't happen in other jurisdictions where we call it a crime. And so if someone is makes the mistake of getting behind the wheel, they drive and they're caught, they're fined, it's heavy. It stays on their record in Wisconsin for their lifetime. If they reoffend, they're going to jail. And there's significant life insurance implications and required alcohol and other drug assessment and treatment. What I do know is that when someone gets behind the wheel after not having learned their lesson, these repeat drunk drivers who get behind the wheel over and over and over again, we have to get tougher on those people. A fourth offense drunk driver in our state can serve as little as 60 days, which is 45 days with good time. I think everyone, Republican, Independent, or Democrat, would say that's not enough. We need to be looking at significantly increasing those minimum penalties for the chronic repeat drunk drivers.
Is the fiscal estimate, which John Richards says is at least $12 million, if you made first offense OWI a crime, a factor? The additional cost of the criminal justice system?
It's a consideration, but I think when you're talking about public safety, it costs money to keep our citizens safe. So I would be naive to say that that's not something that the legislature would consider, but I don't think that's the primary focus. It's certainly something from a district attorney standpoint, the offices, you would need for every office additional prosecutors to handle the caseload increase because people will litigate these offenses once you make them a crime. And again, no one's really defined what they mean by saying I'm going to criminalize, or I want to criminalize an OWA first. What does that mean? True. Does it mean jail? Right. Does it mean something that's going to stay on your record for the rest of your life? What does that mean? The
City of Milwaukee Police Chief Flynn has called for an end to his term, closing loopholes that allow repeat offenders with guns. And do you support those changes?
Yeah, we have to do more to protect our citizens and our innocent people. We've got, the Second Amendment. I grew up hunting. I strongly believe in the Second Amendment, but we all know that there can be reasonable restrictions. I mean, every day we turn on the television and there's a school shooting, there's a mall shooting, there's innocent people who are being killed. And a great example would be, if you've been caught carrying concealed or otherwise, have some sort of a gun violation and you reoffend, why not increase the penalty so that the next time that person is thinking about, illegally possessing a weapon, then make it a felony. Maybe that will get their attention. So there's a lot more that we can do smartly and reasonably. Background checks are another example. There's no reason not to have background checks. That's not meant to deprive law-abiding citizens of their access to guns. It's meant to keep them out of the hands of the mentally ill, the felons, and the people subject to domestic abuse orders.
How's our concealed weapon permit new law working? Any tweaks that you would want to see in it?
Yeah, I think in terms of the carry conceal licensure, I think there are improvements that certainly could be made. It's not even required that people who take that class and get their permit actually shoot their weapon. That would be a common sense approach, I would think, and something in terms of its implementation. I would like to see that law enforcement would be able to access permit holders. So when they're pulling over a vehicle, they run the registration, they can know just for their own safety, hey, this person inside the vehicle has this permit, and just make inquiry. Again, sir, is there a weapon in the vehicle, for for our safety, just so that everybody's safe. Because, again, law enforcement, these are dangerous jobs. We just need to make sure that our officers are safe. Should
12-year-olds be charged as adults?
Oh, you're talking about the Waukesha case,
yes,
right?
ma'am.
Yeah, that's tough. The law allows waiver from juvenile into adult court. You've got to look at, in some situations, yes.
Okay.
When you have a homicide or an attempted homicide or a really, really serious offense, the law allows for that. It should be rarely done because these are kids. They're not, even the case you're referring to, clearly there's something going on there with those girls. Our young people are more susceptible to suggestion. We've got video games and things where they don't understand maybe what's real and what's not. So, I can't comment on that particular case, what I would do or I haven't done, would do or wouldn't do, because I don't know all of the facts. But it's really tragic to see both what happened to the victim, certainly, but then now these young girls who are looking at such serious penalties as adults. We know that children's brains are still forming well past their their 18th birthday. So
right.
it's very tough, but in the appropriate circumstances. But the discretion has to be used wisely and after considering all of the facts of the case.
Democratic Representative, former Judge Fred Kessler says he got it wrong 20 years ago. We should change the law that 17-year-olds can be charged as adult. He would like them drop back to juvie court. Would that be a wise change?
I think it has some real appeal. We see real inconsistencies in our law as to how we treat 17-year-olds. 17-year-olds, if they're victims, for example, if they're if someone has sexual intercourse with them as a child. If someone is 18 and they hit a 17-year-old at school, that's felony child abuse because the 17-year-old is treated as a child. But yet, if that 17-year-old, has a joint or is disruptive or disorderly, now they're going to be charged as a criminal. So it certainly has a lot of appeal, and I think it's something that would even out sort of what appears to what is a disparate treatment of 17-year-olds in our criminal justice system.
You mentioned having a joint. What's your position on medical marijuana?
Well, I think the issue is regulation, right? The full legalization, we're seeing what's happening, in states like Colorado, to see whether that's a good thing or going to ultimately be a bad thing. If you're talking about medical marijuana, it certainly has positives. My father died of cancer. It was horribly debilitating, horribly painful, but we also have to be mindful of the opportunity for people to abuse that exception. But if it was regulated and truly utilized for medicinal purposes, I think that is something that I'd be open to.
All the national studies show, as you know, that Wisconsin leads in the incarceration of African Americans. Do you see that as something that you'd like to change as Attorney General?
Well, you're looking at federal versus state systems, and I know the federal statistics, when we look at incarceration rates, are really depressing. So yeah, the first thing we have to do when we talk about disparities in our prison and our jail populations, but particularly in our prison populations, is figure out why is that happening. It's certainly an issue with regard to the sentences and the guidelines, but there's more than that. We've got to start talking about it, right? We have to first acknowledge that it exists and then figure out how are we going to address it. It's societal. There are cultural issues. There are educational issues. And so again, much like heroin, bringing in all the key players to figure out, how did we get here? Why are young people, engaging in criminal behavior? Is it because mom and dad aren't in the home? Is it because they've dropped out of the school so they can't go and help fill out a job application? Are there other issues in terms of enforcement or disparities in arrests? Disparities, and we have a lot of discretion in law enforcement. Who to arrest, what to refer.
Yes.
District attorneys have a lot of discretion in terms of what do we charge and whether we charge. So utilizing more diversion programs for nonviolent offenses is a great start. But also, again, talking about these issues and acknowledging that they exist. The Attorney General, isn't going to be a legislator, but the Attorney General has the power of the bully pulpit to start talking about these issues that matter, making the public aware of those issues, and demanding that we, as a society, do something to change it.
The shorthand for Attorney General is top cop. Is that a fair summary?
I think so. I think a lot of what that office does in terms of public protection relates to our criminal justice system. The interaction between the crime victim compensation program, the crime lab, the Department of Criminal Investigation, the 980 sex predator commitments, and the tremendous amount of services and resources that DOJ provides to district attorneys and law enforcement. It's a pretty big part of what they do. But of course, what you're getting to is there's a whole lot that doesn't fall under the criminal realm, whether that's consumer protection, environmental protection, things of that nature. But I think most people, when they think of what the Attorney General does, top cop is the first thought.
JB has said, whether it's a constitutional amendment on same-sex marriage or photo ID, that laws that have been passed by the legislature, signed into law by the governor, there's a burden that they are constitutional, and he believes he has a right to defend them. Is that your philosophy?
No, I think that the Attorney General has an obligation to defend laws they believe are constitutional.
Okay.
And has a similar obligation to refuse to defend laws that they believe are unconstitutional. And so on both of those subjects, voter ID and the gay marriage, I would not defend those laws. I think they both have equal protection problems, and I think what we're seeing play out right now, with regard to the ban against gay marriage, is unfortunately an interjection of partisan politics once again into this discussion. It should be about what's constitutional or not, and less about the political agendas behind it. Less about, for example, with the marriage ban. It's not about religious beliefs. It's not about approving of a lifestyle. It's about fairness and equity, and it's about treating people equally and not singling them out or discriminating because of a particular trait.
Just two more questions. One of them is, current law says that the governor must sign off every time the Attorney General asks for a special prosecutor. Mm-hmm. Do you see that as a law that might limit you as a Attorney General?
It could. We utilize special prosecutors in our district attorney's office when there's an internal conflict, and that's typically just among the district attorneys internally, and that is approved of, by our judges. So you want to have oversight. You want to make sure that process isn't being abused. But to the extent you have different parties in different offices, that could present some difficulty. But look, I come from a Republican county. All of my elected officials are Republicans, and I've got a great working relationship with them. And my hope and belief would be, if Governor Walker is reelected, that I can still work with him, because I've done that in Jefferson County. I reach across the aisle. I work with my sheriff to save my taxpayers $250,000. He gets money for process service. I save money. That's what people want to see in their elected officials. So, you want the appropriate checks and balances, but you also want people with different political affiliations to be able to work well together. And
I thought of one more question, so I do only have two more.
Okay.
Speaker Voss has indicated the John Doe system may be broken. Is it?
I think that the current John Doe drama, I'll call it, that we've seen has really shaken people's faith in that system. I think it's shaken people's faith in government. We've got this long tradition of open government. We want our elected officials to be above board and everything to be, for the public to be able to scrutinize. And so I think it's unfortunate that we've had a couple John Does now that has shaken people's confidence in that system.
Has it shaken the faith of prosecutors like you?
I don't know that it's shaken my faith. I think it's a good process. I think if it's applied equally and fairly, without again interjecting politics into it, okay, it can work. I mean, you have to, as a prosecutor, whether I'm Attorney General or District Attorney, I have to be able to take the facts of a case, the allegations against a defendant, mm-hmm, and enforce those regardless of who that person is and what party they belong to. And if we get back on track to doing that, I think we'll start restoring people's faith in the
Final
process.
question, I promise. Any differences you want to highlight between your two primary opponents, ma'am?
What I tell people, and you've hit on some of them, is, I'm endorsed by Emily's List and Ask Me. I'm a mother. I carry a purse, and I ride my own Harley. But the biggest difference really is my ability to earn those very important independent and swing votes without sacrificing or compromising my progressive values. And that's going to be a key to my success in November. Another key is going to be the fact that I'm a rural Democrat. Dane County and Milwaukee are going to be incredibly important, no doubt, in both the primary and the general. But the rural Dems, really want to be, assured that their next Attorney General is someone who's going to understand and care about their problems and their issues and things that are important to them. And I'm that candidate.
Thank you very much. Jefferson County District Attorney Susan Happ is one of 3 Democrats running in the primary for Attorney General. That primary is August 12th. DA Happ, thanks for visiting Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.
Thank you.